Hecate, currently one of the most popular deities for people to work with. There's been a massive resurgence in her popularity in recent years. I think that's down to film, TV, maybe even some computer games that have really sort of popularised her. But she's kind of misunderstood, I would think, as well, from my experience. She's really not the crone as she's often depicted. So what is Hecate? Well, Hecate comes from ancient Greece originally, and she predates the Olympian pantheon of spirits and deities. And she was often worshipped or worked with to offer protection, amongst other things such as fertility and prosperity. But one of the main things that people would work with Hecate or worship Hecate for was for protection. This was a time of war and conflict and battle, and Hecate was often used to bring protection to those people. Now, Hecate is often depicted to be holding torches, to be holding keys and daggers, and all of these are very strong symbolic references to her domain, basically, and her knowledge and her archetype. She's also very strongly associated with dogs, and I find the key thing very interesting because one of the main things that I've experienced with Hecate is unlocking things and transformation, and the key symbolism is something that I very strongly connect with. I bizarrely have always held on to keys that I haven't used in decades, and I just kind of feel drawn to them, and I think that's possibly linked to some of the reasons why I feel so connected to working with Hecate. Let's get the pronunciation out of the way as well. I say Hecate, some people say Hecate, some people say Hecate, Hecate, I've heard, which is a bit strange to me, but whatever. They're all good. It's really down to your personal choice and pronunciation, and it's also down to the spelling. I always use a K, but some people use a C. It all means roughly the same thing, so don't worry about that too much. And someone just got run over outside my house. So one question that I get asked quite a lot regarding Hecate and working with her is, do you have to be exclusive? And no, I understand where the question comes from, but no, you don't have to be exclusive while working with Hecate. But, this is a big but, I would not advise mixing. So it's perfectly fine to do a lot of intensive work. So I went through a period of months of working quite closely with Hecate. And I would work with other spirits and deities and just general magic work alongside that as well. But I would never mix them. So, say if I was working with Hecate in the morning, I'd work with Lilith in the evening or vice versa. But I would never mix them into the same actual magic work. Like how I quite often work with Asmodeus and Lilith, or Belial and Lucifer, or Lucifer and Leviathan. I would never mix working with Hecate that way. That just doesn't seem to work. She is very singular in that way, but it's perfectly fine to do other work alongside your work with Hecate. Another question I get asked quite a lot is, can I stop working with Hecate? Will that kind of curse me? Will things go wrong? No, of course not. Of course not. You can stop working with any deity whenever you want to. It's really down to the self-work and what you've promised to achieve yourself. And you can stop that at any time. I mean, you can go back and forth. Some work you can start and not complete because you're not in the right space, and move on to something else and switch around. It's really down to how much effort and what place you are in within your life. But absolutely, if you wish to stop working with Hecate, you don't have to follow the monthly rituals, for example, of the food offerings. You can stop that whenever you want to. In terms of offerings as well, I'll come on to this a bit later, but the biggest offering that you can give to any deity, particularly with Hecate, is the self-work. So if you're wanting to work on something really specific and you really put that effort in, that's the biggest offering that you can give to yourself and the deity. And one last common thing that I've been asked a lot about Hecate is she judgmental? Will she judge me while I try and work with her? No, not in that way, no. No, there's no judgment. Working with a really, really powerful deity like Hecate, it's above judgment. That's not really the point. And why would a spirit like Hecate be interested in judging? But you may be put in a position of judging yourself, and that would particularly fall under if you're doing any kind of shadow work or really sort of deep self-work. A lot of that can be quite painful and challenging. Hecate is absolutely no nonsense, straight to the point, almost brutally so at times. But sometimes you need that kick up the arse, you need that shock. I often say the person that we lie to the most is ourselves, and you're not going to get away with that with Hecate. If you're wanting to change your life and achieve something, you probably will have to do a lot of self-reflection and honest work to complete that process. And yeah, that can be very, very challenging for a lot of people. But no judgment. You'll probably just face things like, why are you doing this work? What is your real goal? Why do you want to do this? That's not judgment. That's just you facing honesty and being able to really be honest with yourself. So Hecate is really good for opening roads for you. But that means removing the blockages that are blocking these roads. And that can often be a very, very challenging process for a lot of people. If there's something that you need to address, if there's something within yourself that you haven't resolved or is holding you back, Hecate will be absolutely amazing for you to work with in this aspect. But that mirror being held up to you, to maybe your past, to your hidden aspects, the things that you've never really confronted, that can be very, very challenging and very uncomfortable and even painful for a lot of people. But I always try and keep in mind that all of this is for a goal that is greater than the uncomfortableness of going through these things. This is also where I find some parallels with working with Lilith as well. They're very, very different entities, very, very different energies and very different experiences. But Lilith and Hecate do have some similarities in this aspect. They're both extremely good for working on the shadow self and resolving a lot of things like trauma, and particularly things from childhood or things that you possibly aren't even aware of that are holding you back. They do it in very different ways, but they also both do it in ways that can often be very challenging and almost feel confrontational. They're not confrontational, they're just brutally direct and honest at times. But Hecate is great for helping you walk your true path, particularly if, whilst trying to walk your path, you may fall down some holes or get lost. The thing with Hecate is she allows that to be your choice, your mistake. She doesn't mother you. That's the whole point of learning the self, is making mistakes, getting lost, and then regaining and coming back onto the right path. She's absolutely amazing for doing that. Now, one aspect that I wasn't aware of until I started working with Hekate is that just by bringing her energy into your life, just by starting to build that relationship with her, it brings a natural protection. And it also brings what I feel like a natural boost to your magic, to your abilities, to the results that you're seeing, and also encourages you to really push yourself and learn as well. But the protection element I really wasn't aware of until a few weeks, maybe months into working with her, and it just seems to flood into all aspects of my life just naturally. So Hecate is really good for learning spell work and just improving your magical abilities and knowledge in general. She's also really, really good at necromancy. Now, a lot of people use pendulums. I don't. I use either scrying or mirror work for this kind of necromantic experiences. I would say once you build that relationship with Hecate, to maybe actually bring that up directly if it's something that you want to explore, and possibly you'll feel drawn to whichever way is best for you to actually communicate this way. But for me, it's scrying. So despite some of the recent depictions of Hecate, and I'm specifically referencing things like Sandman, she really is not centered around that crone aspect. It is a small aspect, but it's not really an accurate overall depiction of Hecate at all. And there's so much more. For example, she's one of the few deities that has the three different aspects. She can travel through the three different realms: the upper, the middle, and the lower, or as some people see it, the earth, the sea, and the sky. And from my experience of working with her, I've never really felt that I've experienced the three different aspects. I've always felt that it's been one whole aspect. There isn't three different deities is basically what I'm trying to say. I've always felt it's one, but depending on what I'm contacting her for, what I'm working on, sometimes even the time of day, it can vary very slightly, but it always feels like an overall aspect where there's three aspects sort of contained into one deity, if that makes sense. And I think that's why the triple moon, which is often a depiction of Hecate, is a very accurate depiction of that energy and what it feels like to work with her. Now, in particular, if you're planning on doing some of the shadow work, I always think of that as the upper element, the sort of higher vibrational element of working with Hecate. And for that, I've found that she's really good for working on things like really knowing your place, knowing yourself, and what I call destroying the ego, going beyond the ego. So much of our behaviour, and myself still included, but I'm making some progress, and it's very hard work. But moving past that ego, actually destroying it, getting rid of it, which brings you to a much higher state, which is, yeah, like I say, it's very, very challenging work, and there's a lot of natural resistance there, but Hecate would be my sort of go-to choice if you ever wanted to explore that. Now, I find Hecate is one of the few deities that I specifically always give offerings while working, even if it's a daily offering, even if it's something as small as just some fresh water. But I find that it just helps the energy. I don't think the offerings are particularly for Hecate. I think it's more to symbolise the the gratitude and the dedication to the work that you're currently doing. Think of it as like if you're invited to a dinner party. If you turn up without something to offer the host, it's kind of considered rude. So I always see my work with Hecate a bit like that. So obviously you don't have to turn up with a full bottle of wine each time, but offer something. Now, a lot of people say offering things like cookies and pastries, particularly if you bake them yourself. I've always found the best offering that I give to Hecate is either wine or a full bulb of garlic, particularly the garlic. I have a garlic allergy, so it's a slightly testing thing for me to do, but I always make sure that I get a fresh, organic, if I can find it, bulb of garlic to give to the ritual. And then I'll either burn it, and I'll get to that in a second, or I will deposit it at a crossroads, or I think in America you call them crossroads with 3 roads. We call them T-junctions in the UK. So it's, that kind of shape, or that, whichever way you see it. I luckily have a T-junction very near to where I live, and it's very private, so I usually walk down there at 1, 2 a.m, deposit my offerings. Now, there is a bit of superstition with this, and maybe it's just me, but I have this thing of once I put the offering down, I don't look back, and I walk off. And strangely, quite often, I will hear dogs barking shortly after I've given the offering. I think that's quite common with working with Hecate, and it's meant to symbolise the hounds of Hecate. I always take it as a very good sign and a very positive thing that my offerings have been received. Now, the garlic burning, if you were to do this, and I do this to really cleanse an area and offer protection, if that's particularly if it's something I'm working on Hecate with, be very careful doing this. Make sure that you don't have any smoke alarms or fire alarms that are going to be set off. It produces a lot of smoke. Open a window and don't leave it. I often will put some oil, some kind of cinnamon oil or something like that, or lavender oil. That's very good for Hecate. Onto the garlic, and then put it in my cauldron, so to speak, light it, and just let the whole thing burn. It's not pleasant, particularly if you've got a garlic allergy, but it is one of the best ways that you can completely cleanse and give protection to a space. Now, in terms of incense, I always go for lavender. That really does seem to suit Hecate very well. And some of the crystals that you may want to use while working with her would be amethyst, black tourmaline, or possibly obsidian. My personal choice is amethyst. That seems to work much better. So that's my pretty basic but hopefully helpful beginner's guide to working with Hecate. She's an incredible deity, spirit, whatever you want to call her, to work with, and absolutely life-changing. If you do feel drawn to her, I would say absolutely just get on working with her in some way. And if not, but she does pose a bit of interest, maybe just look into her a bit more and maybe just bring her into your meditation at some point. That's all I've got, so go away.